to the Business Blueprint Podcast, where we take you on an exciting adventure through our triumphs and challenges and failures in creating and maintaining a thriving 6, 7, and 8-figure business. Get ready to dive into our strategies, decisions, and yes, even valuable lessons we've learned from our missteps. But that's not all. We'll also bring you industry-leading guests who will provide you with their priceless insights and wisdom. Stay tuned because the captivating journey of the Business Blueprint begins right now. Hi, I'm Charles Hatley with the Business Blueprint. And today, Dan and I are going to talk about something that's a hot button issue for everybody. The next shiny thing, and that is AI, large language models, ChatGPT, everybody's version of natural language questioning, and how that's going to really impact us as businesses in the present, the near future, and probably the far future. So to get started, I think one of the necessary elements is to define how AI works in its current iteration and what a large language model is in its current iteration. And that is, these models go out and like ChatGPT is on a 3-year delay or 2-year delay. It's on some number of year delay. And it's aggregating data from every single searchable source on the internet to try to find you an answer to your question. So when you say, what was the average temperature in this location 100 years ago? It's taking keywords, average temperature, location, years ago, and it's combing the internet to try to find you an answer. And then it's putting all these pieces of information that it gets from the internet into an answer. So it's an aggregate of a bunch of different websites. Some people have called it plagiarism. I know that right now there's some legislation in the United States Senate regarding plagiarism and how that would impact ChatGPT and large language models development. But once we get past that definition, I really wanted to talk to Dan. Dan, in the present, how do you see these large language models and things like ChatGPT being used?
It's going to take off, and if it hasn't really already, and you see it just in day to day when you go visit a website of a company, you'll see a bot or something that pops up on your screen, and that's exactly what you're talking about. And it streamlines the process, which makes things just so much more efficient, and you can really cut back on some of the more minuscule tasks to allow for your workforce to grow, but then also really to determine where your hiring needs are and to maybe reallocate some of that budget money and put it towards something else. And so the Chat GPT is also good for the customer service side, because when someone logs on, maybe they just need a quick answer. And then I can just tell you from personal experience, when you're calling in and you're put on hold and then you get that automated response, it frustrates me. And if I know if I can just type in something and it can either schedule me an appointment or I can get a quick answer, that to me is where I'm seeing a lot of companies go to, at least on the customer service side. But there's so many uses that you have AI for. And I mean, you can do recruiting, you can do finance, you can do safety measures. I mean, it's just dependent upon what business you're in. You really should, at least at a minimum, look into how AI can make things a little bit more efficient for you.
That's absolutely true. I mean, to peel back the curtain a little bit on me, I asked ChatGPT today what I should wear for a business-focused podcast on AI technology, and it said a button-up shirt without a tie and a jacket to look relaxed. I guess that's what it envisioned, or a polo shirt. It said a polo shirt too. But I thought it would be a funny addition to this particular podcast to ask a large language model, what should I wear to talk about you? It really even... I'm not using it, but it gave me an outline of exactly what to talk about today, what questions to ask, and it even told me what answers to say. So, a great example is I asked ChatGPT, "What are you?" And I a few more prompts in there, but it explained what it is. As you look at the proliferation of these large language models, Dan, do you think it's going to cause a reduction in the human workforce or a efficiency factor within the human workforce?
There's a lot of good articles about that and debate and chatter as far as the pros and cons. And it's going to be both. You're going to eliminate some jobs, but you may be creating other ones that you didn't think of because of the long language model or ChatGPT or whatever you're using AI for. And so it's going to make things definitely more efficient for businesses. But then it's also going to take that streamline and allow you to hire in other areas that you may not have thought of, or you didn't have the opportunity to because you were so focused on getting in some of these little more minute details, to where if you have something involved that can make it easier and efficient, then it allows for that company just to focus on other areas, which then you can use that to grow. And that's where I think the biggest benefit is going to be, is how do you leverage this technology to grow your business, but also make things easier for your employees. And that's kind of the crossroads where I feel that we're at.
Yeah. And, technology, I'm always a little bit concerned about adding technologies on top of technologies on top of technologies. I've spoken about this before. I think any technology that you add should be the subtraction of another system. Right? You don't want to just keep adding layers and layers and layers. And you brought up an interesting concept. If I'm able to get on a website and I have an asynchronous way to communicate, right, with an organization. So you contact a professional organization like a law firm, a doctor's office, anybody that would normally have 9 to 5 business hours, and you just happen to be up at midnight and decide, ooh, I'm going to go talk to that person. You can use a chatbot. That doesn't take away a position, because nobody was going to answer that during that time frame anyway, right?
Right.
And from there, you really are utilizing a very narrow scope of the possibility. But you have to teach it what to say. What do you see the future of positions within organizations, or the position will be solely to teach ChatGPT, teach a large language model, teach prompts?
It's going to be, I see a lot of regulatory issues coming up with this. So if you look at from the law firm side, there's going to be ethics involved as far as what advice is potentially being given versus is that advice even correct? And you want to mislead somebody. And so there should be disclaimers added to that, but at least it's a starting point. And then you can encourage someone to schedule a meeting or consultation. If you're on another service industry and you have an issue with plumbing or electrical work, maybe it's something that can outline the steps to take just to kind of check to see, but you don't want to have something that's telling someone, okay, step by step, because there could be other issues involved. And I just know, me personally, there's no way that I would do anything from an electrical or plumbing standpoint, even if the AI was spot on. I just know there's probably other individuals like me out there, but at least it give me a way to kind of look under the hood to see, okay, what are my potential issues? So then I know the right questions to ask. Or you could put in, what are your symptoms? And they'll say, this is who you need to call. Or you brought up from a medical standpoint, type in, here's what I'm feeling. And then it could essentially not prescribe medicine, because that's another regulatory issue that I see for coming. But this is the type of doctor that you will need. Or try these over-the-counter medicines first. Or it could send you to a professional that is in that particular area, and then you can schedule right there on the spot, as opposed to having to wait the next day, and then you're losing time on getting in. And you can do it really in real time. And I would say 90+%, I'm sure it's higher, has a cell phone. And I mean, virtually everybody's on their cell phone at one point a day, right? Just looking for information. And it's just, we had the instant gratification. And that's a huge benefit of what we're talking about, because you can get information in real time.
Mm-hmm. You can. And, bringing up the professional services, the first regulatory body in the United States that I've seen make a decision on this was the Florida State Bar. The Florida State Bar came out and very clearly said that if you, as a law firm, avail yourself of these technologies, you are still responsible for what data these technologies mine from your organization. So anybody that has a duty to keep privileged information, which is almost every organization in the country that requires a social security number, a credit card number, any personal identification information, that allowing ChatGPT, and we keep saying ChatGPT, I'm using it synonymous with all AI language models. All AI language models to access your data means that you're allowing that data now to go back out to the World Wide Web without the internet, without realizing the scope of what you just let out there. And the Florida State Bar actually wrote a very interesting opinion saying it's your data to protect, so you better protect it. And I think that largely follows the European Union model on what they're doing with their advice on it is you've got to continue to protect your consumers' data. So how do you protect consumers' data with these types of technologies?
You have to have processes in place to make sure that it's not be in breach. Because when you're talking about the legal side, the privilege belongs to the client, not
Mhm.
to the firm. And it starts with us as lawyers, and really quite honestly in any business, to educate that potential consumer or client as to what the risks are, and to put practices in place that allow to make sure that information is secure, because you have credit card information, you have social security numbers, you have birthdays. So there's all this information that could potentially be mined to then go out, and others could use it for nefarious reasons.
Mhm.
And so in order for clients to feel comfortable providing this information and trusting that you're going to hold on to it as their property, it's really educating them on what our practices are, what we have in place, and then why we're doing what we do. And you mentioned that opinion from the Florida bar. Lawyers, usually the legal field is behind a lot in coming up to speed on the business side. But I've been reading some interesting articles that the legal field is kind of taking this whole language model and really taking it by the horns, essentially, and trying to move forward with it. But there's just so many pitfalls that any business has to really look into if you're going to use this. It's a great resource as a start, but we want to make sure that we're fact checking, not just completely relying on the chat GPT or whatever long language model that you're using, because it's mining information, right? I mean, it's as if we're just going on the Google and typing something in and then taking that information and then polishing it as if that's what we need to rely on. So we have to make sure that we have practices in place that not only are we protecting consumer information or client data, but that we're also not just strictly relying on that and moving forward. Because from a practitioner standpoint, you can get into a lot of trouble for that. But also just in the medical field, or really quite honestly in any field that's going to use it, it's definitely good to identify potential areas of concern that then you can look into further. But it's something that we don't want to just strictly rely on.
No, not at all. And you talk about the legal community. I read something yesterday where they talked about that, judges were relatively nice to the first. I mean, a lot of people may have read about lawyers going into court with these briefs that were written by ChatGPT that cited the wrong law. And the judges were relatively nice about it, as nice as judges get when you lie to them, which is not nice. About now the judges aren't going to be so nice because you should know that this is a problem. And so what the community as a whole is doing, which I think is the right thing to do, is they're putting the onus back on the user. You know this isn't right. You know what you're doing is not right. And if you're an attorney who's allowing it to write a brief and charging your client an hourly rate, that's not right. If you were a doctor sitting there, like clients tell you, like, hey, my back hurts and my left leg's numb and blah blah blah, and you're typing it in rather than just identifying it's a sciatic nerve, you're like, oh, this says it's a sciatic nerve. Well, I'm not sure how good that medical license is at that point. Another feature of it is, when you're communicating, let's say you're just communicating within your own organization, and you were to say, look, I want to create a business plan, right? I want to create a business plan as something, and you go to ChatGPT, you go to a large language model, it kicks you out a business plan. It doesn't take your superiors much time to realize you didn't write it. So have you received, you may not have, but have you received anything from somebody that reports directly to you that you could tell, like, yeah, you didn't write this? And, what was your response?
Well, fortunately, I have not had that yet. And I say yet because this is something relatively new, and I'm sure we're going to come across it. But it's really goes to identifying why it was used, and then just kind of having that person walk me through the process. Okay, you went on. I like the idea that you're thinking ahead. Okay, let's see what we can do to cut back on time. Maybe I need some ideas. It's always good. I like just to go for a walk or just sit in a different place, but maybe, using some type of long language model is good too. But then you have a structure, but then it's making sure you can remind that person that this is just an outline, it's a structure, but you need to fill in the gaps. You need to fact check. You need to make sure you're doing your due diligence. Otherwise, then to me, I look at that, okay, that's kind of just sloppy or even borderline lazy. And that's just someone that we don't want within an organization. But I don't want to take away from the creativity side of, okay, I'm using this as a resource, but not as something that's going to be gospel. And I'm just going to present it to my superior and say, oh, here you go. And then I'm reading it, and you can just tell that it wasn't written by that person.
It's a risky game, right? If I took something to somebody and said, hey, look at the work I did, and they're like, you got this off an AI thing. I would imagine that at some point in their mind, they're going to say, couldn't I have just typed this in myself and not paid you? So that's where I go. Somebody who has been let go and laid off from a position, I think like, man, I'll go and do that. And they're like, couldn't I just do this myself? Couldn't. So it may be self-protective there. Another use that, in these long language models, I was talking to a business owner probably about a year ago, and they were like, look, I'm instituting this in my organization. I've contacted this firm, and this firm's going to come in and build me this model that we can use internally. I was like, oh man, that seems really cool. And I looked into it, and I contacted that business owner, and I said, you realize they're using an open world model. So there really is two types of AI out there. There's open world models, which are your chat GPT that you're able to search everything in the world. And there's closed world models. And Microsoft Copilot is an example of a closed world model style, even though they have an open world version, where you can say you only use my information. You don't have access to the rest of the internet. Copilot, you can only use my information that I create and get answers. So I called that person back and I said, I told them, I said, you realize you just uploaded all of your data onto the internet. They were using a client management system, and a client management system stores all the information for people. And they were using that to better index their data. And I was like, man, that's problematic, but they didn't know. So how do you start working with people within the organization so they understand the risks of what they're doing?
It goes back to just having open dialogue on, I would start off with, what is the goal? What are we wanting to accomplish? And how best to use technology that's out there? Because if it's not going to accomplish the first two, then it's maybe something we don't want to look into. But usually it probably will. And then we want to take that next step to figure out, okay, how are we going to safeguard and protect the information that we have? Because as you mentioned, once it's published out, it's hard to get any of that back if you can at all. And then you just have so many risks to where you want to make sure that you're protecting your own information, and then deciding, okay, this is what we need to do. What best long language model out there can we at least source to figure out what makes the best sense? And then just take it step by step. This isn't something that, especially if you have no experience or limited experience, you want to just jump into, because you may run into that issue that you just identified. But it's something that you want to talk to the experts in the field and get opinions on before you make your decision on what is best for your company. Because at the end of the day, I think it's a great idea because it makes things easier for your employees, and it brings a little bit more efficiency to the workforce. But at the same time, what could help you out could be the most frustrating thing that is happening to your company. And then you have all those other, that is just going to create a lot of noise, because now you have so many issues that you have to be concerned about. So it's identify, figure out what our goal is, and then what is the best, as you mentioned earlier in the podcast, what technology out there will help us accomplish our goal while minimizing those risks.
And it's difficult because we are bombarded with new technologies. And the reality is AI is creating new technologies faster than we can even imagine them sometimes, or creating the foundation for new technologies, new opportunities. And, we're having to switch from, keeping paper files to electronic files, to everything being on a cloud, and understanding that now I just put everything on the internet, to now I'm allowing something on the internet to index my cloud because I gave it a password and I did it. I'm the one that just compromised all my clients' data by doing that. And I'm now liable, not the technology is liable. So I think keeping, if you want to avail yourself of these technologies, making sure that you put the effort into at least learn enough about the technology on how to ask the right questions on how to protect yourself from that technology is important. So I want to thank you, Dan, for today. Sitting down, talking to me about artificial intelligence, large language models. This is an amazing subject. So, this was part one. We're going to come back for part two of this and really talk about other iterations of AI and what we need to watch out for as business owners. So thank you very much.
Hi, this is Dan Cuneo with the Business Blueprint. Thank you for taking time to listen to this week's podcast. Please join us next week for part two.
Thanks for tuning in. If you found this insightful and entertaining, be sure to hit subscribe below and join us on social media to get more insight into what we are going through each and every day.